Oi, have I got a treat today for you? Yeah, I have. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been speaking to some international best-selling authors to try and get some recommendations for me that I can then pass on to you. Now, you're going to want to wait till the end of this video because I have spoke to some banging authors. If you're new to this channel, my name's Tyrone. I'm probably the only content creator on BookTube that turns up in a pyjama top. Yes, that's what this is. If you're a returning audience, you already know I bloody love you. I genuinely am overwhelmed with the community that we've built in such a short time on this page and appreciate every single one of you. Regarding my mental health and my medication, I'm going to quickly update you. I am now 16 days off antidepressants and anxiety medication and I'm feeling absolutely fantastic. If you've got any questions regarding that, just drop it in comments and you know I'll always come back to you. I'm going to start this off with one of my current favourite authors because as part of this video, as I said, I wanted to find out my current favourite authors, and a lot of these authors that I've got in this video are authors that I'm just gagging for at the minute. I read Part of Your World, which is part one of this world. You can read them in any order, but Part of Your World were a fantastic read. It was actually my first ever contemporary romance, if that's what you call them. And I just ate it up. It was fantastic, and I just needed to get yours truly. So I ordered this off Vinted, and I actually got a library copy as well because I couldn't bother to wait. I've ate this up as well recently, and that's fantastic. Now, the first one's got like funny characters in, really easily accessible, just loads of banter. And the second one, I went into it expecting same. Whoa, it caught me off guard. Jacob, who is the main male character in this book, has got social anxiety and he's just a very anxious person. And this book's about how finding the right person can just help you overcome your fears. It's just class. If I were into men, Jacob would be my forever man, and I'd probably just like walk around everywhere till I find him. Then I'd be like, Jacob, be mine. I've not read Just for the Summer yet, but I'm told this is equally as good. Goodreads says it's banging, so I can't wait to get into that. But I was excited to see who Abby said was her favourite author. And Abby came back to me and said, anything by Kennedy Ryan. And then I thought, that name rings a bell. I've heard of that woman, I don't know why. So I had a quick nevvy around all my bookshelves, and then I was like, boom, I've got a Kennedy Ryan book. Before I let go, I think I picked this up from a charity shop actually for £1. And the cover interested me because I saw that the woman on the front were black. And as you probably know from watching some of my videos, I like diverse characters. I don't just want to read about white straight people all the time. It's interesting to try and read about characters from different cultures, different backgrounds, different sects, different races. And yeah, so I picked that up for that reason, but I'd never heard of the author. Interestingly, I actually got a reply from Kennedy Ryan as well. After Abby had recommended Kennedy to me, I thought, well, I might as well go to Kennedy as well and see what she says. And we got a reply from her as well, so I'm going to go through that with you. Now, as I've said, I don't know much about Kennedy as a writer, so I can't tell you how good her work is. If you have read Kennedy Ryan, please just put it in comments and tell me how class she is, because it might convince me to pick up one of her books next. But what I do know is Kennedy as a person was just fantastic to talk to. She gave me some unbelievable recommendations for books I'd never heard of. So Kennedy's recommendations, she came back and said, for classic romance, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. For historical romance, Flowers from the Storm by Laura Kinsale. Contemporary romance, 7 Days in June by Tia Williams and How to Kill a Rock Star by Tiffany DiBartolo. And queer romance, The Prospects by Katie Hoffman. If I've killed any of them pronunciations of names of the authors or the books, then whatever. Look, I'm common as muck and I'm thick as sugar honey iced tea. So sometimes I'm going to say stupid things. But I just love the fact that she come back with not only just one favourite book, and I love that she also repped the queer romance as well, because that is a category of romance that I haven't really read enough of. I have read For the Fans by Nyla Kay, which that's some heavy smut in that book, but I've not touched on much more when it comes to queer romance. So I'd be interested if anyone's got any recommendations for that subgenre. We are now finally going to look at Carissa Broadbent's recommendation. Now, Serpent and the Wings of Night was a book that I absolutely ate up, loved it, vampires, Hunger Games vibes, it were class, so I was really intrigued to see what kind of books she'd recommend. And Carissa came back to me and said, what a fun idea, my recommendation is Circe by Madeline Miller, honoured to be asked. Now, I was gutted as soon as she said that because I'm a bit of an idiot. I'll be totally honest with you. I actually had copies before of Circe by Madeline Miller and also The Song of Achilles, or A Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. And I did a meet-up with some followers last year, and I took loads of books, and a couple of people said to me, oh, I really want to read Circe and A Song of Achilles. So I took them with me and gave them away. So I don't have physical copies of them books. So I'm kicking myself a bit now because she's saying it's good. And then a lot of people on my stories have said to me, you need to read Circe and A Song of Achilles. So they're probably going to be books that I'll pick up at some point. But yeah, that was her recommendation. Coming up next, I'm going to give you the recommendations from M.W. Craven, who is a police procedural crime author. I don't know why. I've only read The Puppet Show in this series. I always go on about how fantastic this is, and how Tilly Bradshaw, who is the main female character in this series, is one of the funniest, most relatable, well-written characters I've ever read in a police procedural series. But I was, again, interested to see what Mike could say. I was fully expecting Mike to come back to me and just say loads of crime authors, but he didn't. His recommendations took me aback. So his first recommendation was Night Watch by Terry Pratchett, which he says is his favourite book of all time. He then goes on to say Darkness, Take My Hands by Dennis Lehane, his favourite crime novel. Watership Down by Richard Adams is his favourite childhood book. And Le Requiem by Robert Crace, which is the 7th book in the Cole and Pike series, is his favourite ever series. And then anything by Carl Haysen, if that's how you pronounce it. So yeah, that took me aback. So I was fully expecting Mike to come back to me and just say loads of different crime books. Next up, we've got the man himself, Chris Carter. If you've watched this page long enough, you know that I am obsessed with this man. I didn't expect the reply that I got from him. The first thing he said to me was, I don't read very much. And then it got me thinking. I don't know, I automatically assume that authors just read all the time to get inspiration. But then on the flip side, I suppose when you sat down writing books all the time, you want a break, and maybe picking up another book and looking at more words isn't a break that you want. But he did come back and say that there are 2 books that he did think were amazing. One is The Mercy Chair by M.W. Craven, who is the author of this series. I believe it's actually in the same series. I've just not got that far in this series yet. And the other book is called Blood Like Mine. It's the first book of a trilogy, and it's great. Next up, we've got Danielle L Jensen, who I think is one of the most underrated authors, at least that I've read this year. This book here, A Fate Inked in Blood, was one of my favourite books this year, and it's a book that I recommend to anyone that's maybe starting out in fantasy and a bit scared and just doesn't know where to start. This is a Norse-inspired fantasy. There's only really a few characters that you need to focus on. The plot itself is quite interesting. It's fast-paced. I just find it quite easily accessible for anyone that hasn't started reading fantasy yet. And the Bridge Kingdom series is another series of hers that I still need to start, but I've heard fantastic things about this and it gets raving reviews online. Now, Danielle recommended a book that I've actually finished and can fully back a recommendation for. This book here, Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, was my first ever John Gwynne book, and it was actually my first ever Norse-inspired fantasy book that I'd read. Now, when you compare this to A Fate Inked in Blood, I think the 2 different ball games completely. I find Danielle's book is very, very accessible. It's quite easy to follow along. Now, John Gwynne is more epic fantasy. There's going to be a lot more characters, more POVs. There's going to be more world building as well. But I absolutely ate this book up, and I can't wait to get into Hunger of the Gods, which is the 2nd book in this trilogy. John Gwynne also does a series called The Faithful and the Fallen, which I'm told is equally as fantastic as this one. I've got that on shelf somewhere, but I just couldn't find it to pick it up and do this way on camera for you. Now, the next author, I don't actually have the physical book for because I read this book on Kindle Unlimited. It's Leigh Rivers, who's the author of the Edge of Darkness series, I think it's called. I read Insatiable, which is book 1. Book 2 and 3 my wife read as well, and she said that they're absolutely insane. She read them in like a week and a half. Now, it's a dark romance, that, and you're going to want to check trigger warnings before you jump into it. But it follows a girl called Stacey and a lad called Cade, who have obviously had a bit of a history and a bit of a past. They hate each other at the start of the book, but you don't know why. As the story progresses, you start realising why they dislike each other. But they can't escape each other, so it's kind of forced proximity because Stacey is best friends with Cade's sister. Ooh. Now, Leigh says that anything by Penelope Douglas or Rena Kent is fantastic. I'll be honest, I've not read any of these authors, but Penelope Douglas writes a book called Credence, which gets a lot of attention online, and I believe it's because there's some quite smutty smut in there. You know, the spice is spicy. And Rena Kent writes a book called God of Fury, I think it's called. It's a book that's actually been on my radar for a while. That, I believe, again, is an romance. To any of my male followers, subscribers out there, I always say this to you. If you're worried about reading romance because you're a heterosexual male, you can't catch gay. I promise you. I've read these books, you'll be fine. Now, if on the off chance you do read these books and they do turn you on a little bit, then there's a chance that you're always bi, in which case just accept it, move on. But I think with these books, as long as the plot is good, they're wicked. Honestly, For the Fans by Nyla Kay this year was an absolutely insane book for me. If you haven't read that, that's about two stepbrothers, bit weird, I understand, who the family basically tell them, right, you've got to pay for your own college education. They're like, how are we going to do this? So they're like, let's do OnlyFans. It starts off that they're just doing photos of each other, and then things start to progress. One of them is definitely more open to the idea of trying things. The other one's a bit more closed off. But it's a story about accepting your sexuality, exploring your sexuality, and it's just a wicked book. So For the Fans by Nyla Kay is my recommendation, because I haven't read any of these books that Leigh Rivers told you. And wait till the end as well of this video, because I'm going to give you my one recommendation that I recommend that every single person read this year. I absolutely adore this woman. So Callie Hart was a lady that I was always going to approach for a recommendation. She's the author of Quicksilver, and that again is another book that I really enjoyed this year. It's romantasy, there's some spice in there, it's enemies to lovers, and the magic system in it is really cool. It's a different magic system. It's like a metal-based magic system. So if you're into romantasy, I highly recommend you try that if you haven't already. But not only is the book great, but Callie as a human is just such a fantastic person. We speak a lot on Inbox. She came into my life earlier on this year before she was actually picked up by a publishing house, and I tried to help promote her book then. I'm just so happy I did. I try my best to help out with independent authors, but I am a people pleaser, so I sometimes struggle with requests. I feel like if I help one person, I have to help everyone. But I just saw more than a book in Callie. Like I said, she's a beautiful human being, and I couldn't help but just want to help her get her book out there. And I'm so glad that she's gone viral. I'm so glad that she's got all the success, and any future success that comes to her, she absolutely deserves. So Callie recommended Gideon the Ninth. It's such a sharply written book with such a unique, phenomenal premise. I don't know what happened then. I couldn't read, but I also didn't want to stop and have to re-edit the video. So have a look at that book if you want. Gideon the Ninth. A few people since I spoke to Callie have also said to me that that's a fantastic book. Brynne Weaver. She gave us some bangers, I'll tell you that. Brynne Weaver is the author of Butcher and Blackbird and Leather and Lark. Now, I haven't read Leather and Lark yet, but I did read Butcher and Blackbird. I would say that's probably dark romance again, and there's some minging stuff in that book. Like, that book put me off ice cream for a good week or two, which I actually told Brynne on this email. So at the end of the email, after asking for recommendations, I said, P.S. you ruined ice cream for me. She replied, ha ha, I'm not sorry. She shouldn't be. Anyway, Brynne recommends that you read The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava, Wicked is the Reaper by Nisha J. Tully, Crossed Over by Santana Knox, The Book of Azrael by Amber V Nicole, and Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. Out of all of them, the only book I'd actually heard of was The Book of Azrael, because that was my book club read for last month. And I had actually got some recommendations from Amber V Nicole, who is the author of Book of Azrael, which will be coming up soon in this video. H.D. Carlton, I believe, is the author that wrote that really popular one that everyone wanted to read. I can't remember what it's called. Let me have a quick look here. H.D. Carlton books. Haunting Adeline and Hunting Adeline. They're meant to be like proper dark romance. I haven't read them. I've got no interest really in reading them at the minute, unless someone says to me, Tyrone, they're absolutely insane, you need to read them. So that's what Brynne recommended. But yeah, if you're into dark romance, I definitely recommend you give Butcher and Blackbird a go. It's interesting, definitely. And the audio on that book as well is like proper good. It's like rate class. So I may as well now go into Amber V Nicole, who is the author of A Book of Azrael, because we've just been talking about her. She came back to me and said, Hi Tyrone, this is amazing. I love that you're doing this. Thanks to you and Brynne for including me. Here are my recommendations. Blood and Brudges by Michaela Hornedo. I've killed them. Whatever, not bothered. Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. A Fallen Sword by Cavan Herning. Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mehrer. I see her name loads and I never know how to pronounce her name. And then Ledge by Stacey McEwen. So they were the recommendations by Amber. Me and Amber had a little bit of a chat. She was so lovely. And then I sent her a little picture just to show her that we were reading her book this month in the book club and that it had loads of positive praise. And obviously she enjoyed that, because I think it's important that if you love a book, go onto your author's page, follow them, because it matters, and inbox them, tell them, or go on, comment, because they will read it. They might not always come back to you, because these are busy people, but it makes a difference when we tell these authors what we think of the books. And not only that, if you're too scared to jump in their inbox, jump on Goodreads or Amazon and just bang a little review on for them, because again, it makes a difference. I've been slaying this name for a while. Kristen Ciccarelli. Anyway, if I pronounced it wrong, you can tell me. She's the author of Heartless Hunter / Crimson Moth. If you're in England or UK, it's called Crimson Moth. I think if you're anywhere else in the world, it's called Heartless Hunter. But that's a book that I actually read as part of my book club a couple of months ago on Kindle and really enjoyed it. So I just ain't got a book to show you again. But Kristen came back and said, I love this, absolutely. Here are some of my favourites. Fireborn by Rosaria Munda, Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia McKillip. Thanks for reaching out. Now, if you haven't read Crimson Moth / Heartless Hunter, I think there's a second book out as well. I don't know if it's out yet or it's coming out, but it actually follows a witch who is in a world where there's been a revolution and witches have become the hunted. And then by night time, she's like a vigilante who goes around trying to save witches. And then in the daytime, she plays like a noble woman. It's cool. I think it's very good anyway. I think you should read it. Class. Very good. Paige Toon got back to us with a recommendation for Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I believe that's the one that I haven't read. Yes, it is. That's the one that I still need to read. And she also said Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover, which is interesting for me because I always relate Colleen Hoover to Verity, which is a psychological thriller. And I absolutely love that book. But then I have to remind myself that I believe she is actually a romance writer at heart. Now, Paige Toon is the author of Seven Summers, along with many other romance books. So if you want to check out her work, then check it out. If you have, and you've got any good recommendations for me, then bang it in comments, because I haven't read much of her work, but I'm always willing to try books if you say they're good. Ian Rankin, he's up next. He's massive around this neck of woods. I don't know if he's big out in States, but he does a police procedural series about a character called Inspector Rebus, I think his name was. And he's just class. Very good. And he come back to me and said, Muriel Spark, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, Anthony Burgess, A Clockwork Orange, and Robert Louis Stevenson, Kidnapped. So yeah, I was grateful that he come back, because I've read quite a few of his books, and I just get giddy. When people or authors come back to me and I love their work, I just get a bit like starstruck. It's very good, isn't it? It's just class. Next one, Rosie Hewlett. I'll be totally honest, I haven't read this book. It's called Media or Media. It's going to be on screen somewhere anyway. But the reason I put this in the list and approach this lady is because every time I go into Waterstones, this is the book that I look at and I think, shall I? Shan't I? Looks a bit fit. Oh, but I don't buy it and I don't know why. So I wanted to approach her anyway because she's won loads of awards and Waterstones always tell me that her book's really good. So she messaged me back and said, that's a great idea for a series and thank you for asking me. I'd recommend The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. That makes me angry because I gave it away. As my all-time favourite book. And as for a recent read, I'd recommend In Memoriam by Alice Wynne and Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. Why? It's almost like they challenged me with these names on purpose. Anyway, for a series, I'd recommend reading Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I can't tell you about all the rest of the books that she's recommended because I've not read them. However, Red Rising by Pierce Brown, that book slaps. So if you've not read Red Rising, it's sci-fi. It's set on Mars, but we as humans have gone to colonise Mars. And on Mars, they've got different colours. So they're almost like done by Rankin. So red at the bottom, and then you've got different colours in between, and then golds at the top. Now, something happens at the start that makes the main character, Darrow, want to become a gold and infiltrate the golds and basically destroy them from the inside. And it's class. Red Rising is the first book. The second book is called Golden Sun. I've not read that yet. But I highly recommend, again, if you've not tried sci-fi before and you want a good entry point, Red Rising is definitely that. It is just wicked. Jungle is massive. I'll be honest, I think I've missed a couple of authors. I screenshotted all the replies, and I can't find them. I think I had one from A.J. West, who's the author of The Betrayal of Thomas True, and he's an absolutely fantastic man. If you want to read his book, it's called The Betrayal of Thomas True, and it's set in the, I believe, 18th century, and it's about a gay man and what it was like to be gay in the 18th century. It's about molly houses. It's something that I want to read. I keep saying to him, dude, I need to pick your book up, but I'm just so busy with all other stuff that I've got on. So if you want to read that and you're interested in kind of 18th century and molly houses and what it was like to be gay back then, read it. I believe the audio is meant to be cracking on that as well. So yeah, try it. Get it, read if you want. If you don't, whatever. I don't get paid for it. Now, before I wrap it all up, I did promise you that I'd give you my one recommendation for a book that every single one of you should read this year. And it's free. It's on Kindle Unlimited. It is, boom, Dungeon Crawler Core by Matt Dinnerman. Now, I don't care if you read romance, fantasy, romantasy, sci-fi. This is a category on its own. It's called Lit RPG, which stands for Literature RPG, which is like a role-playing game in a book. It is wild. It follows a lad called Carl and his cat. I don't know if you can see that cat there. It's not actually his cat. He's basically nicked it off his ex-fiancée who's cheated on him. So they're stood in back garden, he's having a cig, and then he turns around and all of a sudden every single building on Earth is flat, it's gone. Anyone that was inside a building at the time when it happened, they're with Jesus. Anyone that was outside gets a chance. These aliens come on this big tannoy and they're like, if you want to survive, come into the dungeon. So they go into this portal, they're in a dungeon. They're then told, right, there's 18 floors, I think there is. I've only read book one so far, but there's an amount of floors that are dungeons, and they have to go through all the dungeons, and if you get to enter them, you survive, and you can take over your planet. But en route, there's obviously all sorts of crazy different creatures that they have to come up against. He's running around in a pair of Crocs at start and a pair of boxer shorts. He's got a cat that learns how to talk, and she's just sassy. She's just a cat, isn't she? All cats are sassy. You just got to read it. It's hilarious. I don't want you to go into this thinking like, oh, it's going to be a literary masterpiece. It's not. It's just going to be a fun time. And every single one of you is going to enjoy it. And if you don't, unsubscribe or something if you want. But I've said this before, you can't do that because my dad left me when I was a kid and I've got like separation anxiety and stuff. So you're just going to have to read it and love it. And even if you don't love it, you're going to have to tell me you love it just to make me feel better. Anyway, I've really enjoyed this and I put some effort into this. So if you wouldn't mind smashing the like button, making sure you subscribe, all that jazz. We'll have more of a vloggy video next time, but I was just really excited to do this because these authors are right good, aren't they? Just imagine if there were no authors, there'd be no books. What would we do? Watch Love Island or something stupid? I don't know. Anyway, if you've watched till this point, I love you the most. I'll see you in a bit. Emily, I'll see you in a bit, mate.